I always assumed the cruelest part of getting old would be the quiet. I pictured the world slowly dimming into a soft hush until only my thoughts remained, rattling around inside my skull like loose coins. I used to imagine sitting in a chair one day, swallowed by silence, forgotten by the world. Turns out I was wrong. The real cruelty is when you hear everything with perfect clarity, while the people you love convince themselves you don't hear anything at all. Before I go further, please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. My name was once John Carter. Or at least that's what people used to call me back when I ran crews and built things that scraped the sky. These days, my son and his wife call me Ray, the way someone might nickname a dog they don't particularly want to pet. To them, I was a piece of furniture that happened to breathe. A dusty relic occupying space in their immaculate suburban home. I sat in the sunroom the way they liked, eyes closed, jaws slack, hands folded over a blanket. The sunlight soaked through the thin glass and warmed my brittle skin. I must have looked peaceful, almost harmless. My daughter-in-law, Serena, once joked, not realizing I could hear her, that I made the room feel authentically vintage. And she laughed in that bright brittle way she always does when she's annoyed. They believed my hearing was gone, and honestly I let them believe it. What they didn't know, what nobody knew except my late wife and the doctor, was that I wore a cutting-edge hearing device behind my thinning hair. It wasn't one of those squealing retirement home gadgets. This one had directional focus, noise isolation, and a feature that connected directly to my phone. Most days, they assumed I thumbed around on my phone to stare at weather forecasts or photos from the job sites I ran back in the 80s. In truth, I was using a feature called SoundLink to survive. I heard Serena's perfume before I heard her steps. Sharp, medicinal, and expensive. Lavender with chemicals. She swept into the sunroom and paused, waiting to see if I'd react. I kept perfectly still. My breathing slow. My eyelids were heavy, my chin drooped toward my chest, and I could practically feel her satisfaction as she set a teacup down beside me. Chamomile again. She always chose chamomile. I hated chamomile. There you go, Raymond, she sang, the fake sweetness of her voice making my stomach twist. This should help you relax. She lingered there a moment, trying to decide if I was truly asleep or simply ignoring her. When I refused to give her either satisfaction, she sighed, long, theatrical, weary, and walked back toward the kitchen with the sharp click of annoyance in her heels. I waited until the kitchen door swung shut behind her before sliding my hand beneath the blanket. My fingers, crooked and scarred from decades of machinery, steel beams, and poured concrete, tapped twice on my phone screen. The audio from the kitchen filled my ears, crisp as glass. He's passed out again, Serena muttered. Gone was her sugary tone. Her voice was edged with irritation and something darker, impatience wrapped in hunger. He just sits in that damn chair. It's creepy. Like some museum exhibit. He's old, Serena, my son replied. His name was Caleb. My only son. I could hear paper rustling, bills, contracts, maybe letters he didn't want me to see. Just leave him be. We don't need to babysit him. We don't have time to leave him be, she hissed. The refinancing freeze hits in 2 weeks. The account is practically empty, and the loan sharks aren't interested in excuses. You know the trust is worth nearly $400,000. And we can't touch a cent unless he's... She stopped, letting the word hang in the air like a knife. Incapacitated. My chest tightened. My heartbeat thudded in my throat, hot and nauseating, as I pressed a trembling finger against the phone screen to boost the amplification. I know the numbers, Caleb snapped. He sounded tired in a spineless, miserable way. Stop repeating them. Then do something about it, Serena said sharply. The basement stairwell is the cleanest route. No witnesses. No questioning. And the best part? Double payout for accidental falls. It's practically elegant. A soft, humorless laugh followed. A little breathy exhale, amused in a way that made my blood chill. I sat silently in the sunroom chair, the sunlight now feeling like a spotlight on a condemned man. My own son didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He didn't choke on the horror of what she just said. He just sighed, a long, defeated sound that tasted like betrayal. For 30 years I broke my back to put that boy through good schools and give him the kind of life my father could only dream about. I tore the ligaments in both shoulders hauling steel beams during winter freezes, and I spent my nights icing bruised knees and praying my lungs could handle one more year on the sites. And here he was, planning my exit like he was reorganizing a garage. Before I continue, tell me this: if you were in my shoes, and you heard your own family whispering about how to make you disappear, what would you do? Comment your instinct, fight back or play dumb? Back in the kitchen, Serena lowered her voice to a venomous murmur. He can barely walk. One slip in the dark is all it takes. And nobody questions a fall at his age. She actually laughed, a tiny little laugh that sounded like ice snapping in a glass. How poetic, really. Built skyscrapers his whole life, and taken out by a staircase. My jaw clenched and my throat burned. My eyes stayed closed, but hot tears slid down the sides of my face into the fabric of the chair. I didn't sob. Didn't gasp. Didn't tremble. The tears just rolled quietly, as though my body had decided to weep without asking permission. I wasn't family to them anymore. I was a problem. A financial burden. A payday waiting for gravity. If you are listening to this and you have children of your own, look at them carefully. Make sure you know if they see a parent, or a price tag. I wish someone had warned me sooner. But the thing about builders is, we don't collapse quietly. And I wasn't done listening yet. Wait until you hear what I discovered next. The days that followed crawled by with a slow-burning dread, each hour layered with the kind of awareness that makes your bones buzz. I remained in that same sunroom, the same chair, the same blanket draped over my knees like a funeral shroud, pretending to nap while my mind mapped out every possible route to my own execution. Serena drifted past me with her perfect posture and hollow smile, offering me cups of tea and plates of fruit as if she were caring for a well-loved antique. She had this talent for applying kindness like varnish, thin, glossy, and suffocating. Caleb, meanwhile, tried to act natural. He would ask if I was comfortable, if I needed anything, if I wanted the television volume up, and every time he did, his voice cracked just slightly. Guilt, maybe? Or fear. Hard to tell when a man has traded his spine for financial solvency. But the house betrayed them. The house is always honest if you know where to look. One afternoon I watched through half-closed eyes as Serena adjusted the hallway runner at the top of the basement steps. She tugged the corner with precise little movements, smoothing the fabric flat and setting it down without the grip padding underneath. My heart kicked against my ribs. That runner had been secured for years, held in place with carpet tack and anti-slip mesh. Now it slid against the hardwood like silk against polished marble. My breath turned cold. The kind of cold that leaves you hollow. That evening, I stood slowly from my chair, leaning hard on my cane. My legs shook, not entirely from age. I shuffled into the hallway, dragging my left foot slightly to keep up the illusion of fragility. The dim bulbs hummed overhead, casting murky shadows that stretched and melted into the corners. The basement door loomed at the end of the corridor, ajar like a mouth waiting to swallow me. "Dad?" Caleb's voice came from behind, sharper than he meant it to be. "Where are you going?" "To the restroom," I rasped. My voice felt dry as chalk. "I can make my own way." He stood up too fast, knocking a magazine to the floor. "No, wait. Let me help you. The lights in the hallway are burned out. I'll fix them tomorrow." From the living room, I heard Serena rise, her heels tapping toward us with calculated urgency. She slid an arm under mine before I could protest. Her grip was too tight. Too eager. "Careful now, Ray," she murmured, guiding me. "It's so easy to lose your balance when it's dark." My heart thudded in my throat, and for the first time in years I tasted true fear, raw, metallic, electric. I planted my cane firmly, my knuckles white, refusing to tilt even an inch toward that open stairwell. Serena's body tensed. She paused. And then, barely a whisper, a little testing push against my shoulder. A gentle nudge. An experiment. A dry, humorless laugh almost escaped me, but I smothered it with a cough. Oh, they wanted me to fall so badly they could practically taste the insurance payout on their tongues. I cleared my throat and leaned away, steady and stiff. I can manage, I muttered, sounding just winded enough to keep her satisfied. She let go of my arm, her breath brushing my cheek. Just be careful, she breathed. There was a subtle tremor of anticipation tucked beneath her syrupy tone. A promise disguised as concern. That night I locked my bedroom door and stayed awake. The shadows in the corners flickered as headlights from passing cars streaked through the curtains, and every creak of the old house made me clench my jaw. Memories of construction days flooded back, men falling from scaffolding, bones snapping against rebar, the awful sound of breath leaving a body for the last time. Back then, accidents were tragic. Now, accidents were strategy. By Thursday morning, adrenaline had burned away my shock and left only calculation. My hands trembled, not from age but from purpose. As soon as I heard the back door open and saw Serena and Caleb outside arguing with each other about landscaping plans afterward, I pushed myself up and shuffled to the kitchen. Their junk drawer was a graveyard of unpaid bills, expired coupons, spare keys, and crumpled envelopes. My fingers dug through the chaos, pushing aside notices stamped with red letters, final warning, past due, bank action pending. My pulse surged with every new paper I uncovered, a cold mixture of fury and disbelief tightening around my chest. Then I found it. A freshly printed insurance policy in a neat folder. Not dusty. Not forgotten. Brand new. Dated exactly 3 weeks prior. My breath hitched. I opened it, scanning the details, and at the bottom was a flawless replica of my own signature. My stomach lurched. Caleb had always been good at drawing. When he was young, he used to sketch bridges and rooftops for hours, shading the beams with such care. I once thought it was talent. Now I realized it was forgery training. Beside the policy lay a printed sheet, highlighted in neon pink, detailing the indemnity for accidental household falls. The payout had been doubled. $400,000. My knees nearly buckled. This wasn't a possibility. It wasn't a suspicion. It was architecture. A whole scaffold plan aimed straight at my obituary. Pause here. Quick question. Do you think money can make a person kill someone they once cried to as a child? Or do you think the route was already inside them long before the opportunity? Tell me your take in the comments. I genuinely want to know. I snapped photos of every page, every signature, every highlight, every damning little sentence. Then I tucked the documents back exactly where I found them, smoothing the papers and closing the drawer to its usual cluttered imperfection. I returned to my sunroom chair just in time. The back door swung open, and I pulled the blanket over my lap as my chest rose and fell slowly, the picture of a dozing old man. He's still in the chair, Serena whispered. Good, Caleb replied. We'll replace the bulbs tomorrow. Saturday night's still optimal. Optimal. They were discussing days. Logistics. Weather patterns. As if they were planning a retirement party instead of a murder. I stared at my trembling hands, hands that once built towers and held my son when he was small, and felt something inside me click into place. Not fear. Not despair. Resolve. I might have been old, but I was nobody's easy blueprint. They thought they were calculating my last days. They had no idea I was already planning the audit of my life, and the reckoning that was coming for theirs. From that day onward, I embraced my role as the fragile elderly man they believed they were shepherding toward the grave. I dragged my foot a little heavier. I let my hands shake when I reached for a glass. I stared too long at walls, letting my eyes glaze just enough to make Serena roll hers and sigh as though exhaustion was an act of cruelty I had inflicted on her personally. The television became my accomplice. I blasted the volume to a level that would have startled a stadium crowd, letting news anchors and game show hosts roar through the house like thunder. I pretended I couldn't distinguish one voice from another, nodding blankly when Serena leaned close and asked if I needed my hearing checked. She laughed when I didn't respond. But behind the mask, my hearing aid was on focus mode, sharp, precise, and merciless. I heard everything. Every whisper. Every strategy meeting held in the kitchen when they thought the roar of the television created privacy. Every hissed conversation in the hallway when they believed their shadows spoke louder than their voices. They adjusted the environment with surgical care. The runner was moved again after the cleaning lady left. Carpet tacks were pulled from the landing and placed quietly into a plastic bag. Even the pantry light disappeared, burned out, they claimed, leaving a convenient pocket of darkness just feet from the basement door. It was like watching termites feast on a house you had built with your own hands. Silent. Patient. Methodical. One afternoon, while a nature documentary bellowed lions roaring across the African plain, Serena walked into the kitchen. I adjusted my phone and let the SoundLink feed fill my ears. He didn't even flinch when I stood behind him in the pantry, she said, the amusement in her voice coated with a sweetness that made me feel sick. He stared straight at the cereal boxes. Didn't notice the light was out at all. Caleb chuckled, a quiet, nervous exhale that made my stomach twist. At least we know his awareness is fading. Oh please, she snapped. Don't get sentimental. Sentimental doesn't pay off debts. Her spoon clinked against the ceramic of a coffee mug. The casualness of it made something inside me crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but like ice breaking under slow pressure. Pause for a second. Let me ask you something. If the people you loved laughed about your exit from this world, would you confront them or gather evidence and let karma speak? Think about it. Now back to the story. Caleb leaned against the kitchen table hard enough for its legs to groan. I knew that table. I bought it for them as a wedding gift, mahogany, handcrafted, solid enough to survive a tornado. I spent 3 months' salary on that thing. Now it was just the war room for my death. We do it Saturday, Serena said. Her tone sharpened, becoming almost melodic in its certainty. After the guests leave the dinner. The house will be messy. The lights dim. Perfect chaos. A stumble in the dark won't raise questions. Saturday, Caleb whispered. I could hear his nerves rattling through the word. All right. I didn't weep this time. The grief was done. The betrayal was done. Something colder remained, something that hummed through my blood with vicious clarity. I wasn't merely surviving. I was building a dossier. Every conversation recorded. Every policy photographed. Every detail uploaded to a secure cloud folder my late wife had once insisted I learn to use. God bless her. Martha always did believe in backup plans. But I knew I couldn't finish this alone. Good structures are built by crews, not lone men. So on Wednesday, I asked Serena with a weak voice if I could go to a senior social hour at the local diner. The suggestion delighted her so much she practically shoved me out the door with a warm coat and a cold smile, as if the fresh air might speed up the process. Don't wander off, she said, her nails tapping the doorframe as I left. Outside, the autumn wind bit at my cheeks. I shuffled across the parking lot, each step shaky but driven. I didn't go to any social hour. I went to a corner booth in the back of Miller's Diner, a greasy little slice of heaven where the smell of onions and old coffee soaked into the walls. Miller was already there, waiting in that booth like a brick wall carved into human shape. I hadn't seen him in decades, but time hadn't softened him. His hands were still as solid as cinder blocks, scarred from years of pouring concrete beside me in the bitter winter months. You look like hell, Ray, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. I'm living in it, I muttered, collapsing into the booth. He slid a manila folder across the table. No dramatics, no hesitation. I listened to the audio you uploaded, he said, his voice dropping into that gravelly register that meant he was fighting disgust. I've seen a lot of bad things in my line of work. But this isn't just greed. It's industrial-grade evil. I let out a bitter little laugh, scratchy and wet. I need to know about the insurance agent. Miller tapped the folder. That's your midpoint twist, my friend. The agent's name is Marcus Thorne. He's Serena's brother. My stomach lurched. He's drowning in gambling debt, Miller continued. Local casinos owes enough to make a bookie pray for him. And guess who just so happens to work at the underwriting firm for that shiny new policy? I stared at the photo clipped inside the folder. Marcus had the same predator's eyes as his sister. Something icy slid down my spine. It wasn't just that they wanted me gone. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't coercion. It was a syndicate. They're hosting a dinner Saturday, I said, my voice steady now. Investors. Family friends. The whole charade. Miller nodded once. A legacy dinner. I smiled for the first time in weeks. It felt strange. Bitter. Electric. Then I want to give them exactly what they asked for. What do you need from me? Miller asked. Not inside, I said, sliding my cane under the seat. Not yet. Just be there when the structure fails. Miller's jaw tightened, a pulse jumping in his cheek. I'll be there. I took a long breath, letting it shudder out of me. I'm not the one in the corner, I murmured. Saturday was coming fast. They thought they were preparing the perfect stage for my accident. They didn't realize I was preparing the finale. The rest of the week moved like a slow procession toward judgment. While Serena and Caleb scrambled around the house polishing silverware, arranging flowers, and practicing their bright society smiles in the hallway mirror, I watched with a kind of eerie calm. It amazed me how well they could perform happiness. How easily laughter could be summoned when debt and murder sat quietly behind their eyes. They rehearsed their lines like actors in a play: sympathy, pride, devotion, all the things good children and good spouses are expected to display when the world is watching. Saturday arrived with a heavy, humid heat that clung to the wallpaper and made the air feel thick enough to chew. Delivery vans crowded the driveway. The caterers rushed inside with trays of roast beef and wine bottles, trailed by the scent of lilies so sweet it made my teeth ache. Serena adored lilies. She said they made the home feel elevated. I had always thought they smelled like funerals. The dining room filled with people in suits and cocktail dresses, investors, old colleagues, neighbors who had once borrowed tools from me and never returned them. They chattered and laughed, their voices rising like birds fluttering for status. They sipped wine and congratulated each other on nothing in particular. Fake smiles. Fake interest. A symphony of performance. And there I sat, at the head of the long mahogany table in a charcoal suit I hadn't worn since Martha's funeral. The fabric felt stiff, like wearing my own obituary. Caleb stood at the opposite end of the table, raising a crystal glass filled with a deep red wine. His voice quivered, but he hid it behind a polite smile. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he said, performing sincerity like a trained actor. This home has been in our family for many years, built with hard work and love. And as my father, Raymond, enters his twilight years, Serena and I feel privileged to care for him in the place he built with his own hands. A chorus of "to family" echoed around the table as glasses clinked and strangers nodded approvingly. The hypocrisy of it burned in my throat. Serena leaned over and placed a delicate hand on my shoulder. Her touch was feather-light, but I felt the coldness beneath her skin, the stillness of a predator waiting for the lights to dim. She smiled for the room with bright eyes and a gentle tilt of her head, the image of compassion. Somewhere deep inside her chest, calculation ticked like a clock. When the toast ended, the room settled into a soft clinking of utensils against china. The wine breathed, the lilies perfumed, the guests chattered politely about business and investments. The show was flawless. Until I stood up. I have a toast of my own, I said. My voice was not the frail whisper I had been using all week. It was clear, resonant, full-bodied. The kind of voice that had once sent orders rattling up steel beams and through concrete dust. The room went silent so fast the air itself seemed to tighten. Caleb's glass froze halfway to his mouth. Serena's hand paused on my shoulder, her fingers tensing into claws. Dad, Caleb stammered, color draining from his face. You don't have to. Oh, I think I do, I interrupted. I didn't reach for a glass. I reached for my phone. I had spent the afternoon syncing my phone to the home surround system, the one Caleb installed last year to impress his investor friends with modern luxury. The irony tasted sweet enough to make me laugh inside. I've spent a lot of time in that sunroom these past few weeks, I said, pacing slowly toward the center of the room. Listening. Really listening. Being old teaches you something important. People say their truest thoughts when they believe you've stopped being a person. I tapped the screen. The speakers hidden in the crown molding erupted, not with music, not with a speech, but with Serena's voice. The basement stairwell is the cleanest route. No witnesses, no suspicion. Double payout. It's practically elegant. The sound hit the dinner guests like a physical force. Forks clattered onto plates. Someone gasped. Serena's face didn't just pale, it turned a waxy, translucent gray. She lunged forward slightly, her mouth opening to speak, to deny, to spin, anything, but no sound came out. Then Caleb's voice joined hers through the speakers, thin and fragile. Saturday night. After the dinner. The recording continued, plans, whispers, laughter about how they'd use the insurance money to redo the landscaping and pay off the loan sharks. With each sentence, the room shrank. Friends recoiled. Investors stared. Moral horror rippled across their polished faces. One woman pressed a hand to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Another man leaned back in his chair as if the room now smelled rotten. Caleb sank into his chair. His knees gave out. He stared at the mahogany table like he was seeing the grain for the first time, seeing the memory of me signing the check for it, decades ago. His lips trembled. His eyes glistened. But guilt was too late. Serena's mask shattered. Her breath came fast, shallow, panicked. Her pupils shrank. When she finally spoke, her voice was ragged. It's a joke. He edited it. It's... The guests weren't listening anymore. I walked out of the dining room toward the hallway. The room split open around me as people moved out of my path like I was a ghost made of judgment and consequence. When I reached the top of the basement stairs, I used my cane to flip the hallway runner back in one swift motion. The polished hardwood gleamed. The missing tacks glinted. The sabotage exposed. I spent my life building structures that stayed upright, I said, turning back toward the room. Tell me something, would you have exposed them now, or would you have waited for the fall they planned? Think about it. Now follow me back into the story. Before Serena could lunge toward me, before Caleb could choke out a defense, the front door opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside with Miller behind them. No shouting. No dramatics. Just the cold metallic click of handcuffs being fastened around wrists that had once held champagne glasses and business contracts. Guests stood in stunned silence, lips trembling, eyes burning. They filed out of the house with hurried steps, refusing to meet my eyes, refusing to offer pity. No one wanted to touch the wreckage of a family. And just like that, the performance was over. But the story didn't end when the door closed behind them. The aftermath was its own kind of silence, one I had never expected to find comfort in. One by one, the guests slipped out the front door with their coats draped over their arms and shame pressed onto their faces. Nobody offered condolences. Nobody looked at me. They scurried away as if betrayal were contagious and they might catch it through eye contact. Outside, the police lights washed the walls in red and blue, turning the family photos in the hallway into flashing little tragedies. Serena and Caleb were led down the walkway, their wrists bound, their heads lowered. I couldn't tell if Caleb was crying, but I could see his shoulders shaking. It didn't matter anymore. Tears don't undo blueprints. The house exhaled when the door finally shut. The lilies no longer smelled sweet, they reeked of artificial grief. The roast beef on the table steamed and cooled in the silence. Wine glasses stood abandoned, half full, lipstick smudged, fingerprints glistening. It looked like a celebration someone had unplugged mid-sentence. I walked back toward the sunroom, each step heavier than the last. My cane clicked against the hardwood like a metronome marking time that refused to stop. When I sank into my armchair, the cushions embraced me like an old friend. I reached up and slid the tiny switch on my hearing device. The world went mute. The hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of traffic outside, the ticking of the grandfather clock, gone. All of it vanished in one soft sigh of silence. The absence of sound weighed on me, pressing against my ribs until my eyes filled. I always believed silence would be the cruelty of old age. For years I feared the day the world would forget how to speak to me. I feared becoming irrelevant, invisible, unheard. But now, for the first time, the silence felt like safety. I had lost my son. And that loss carved something deep and jagged into my chest. The boy who clung to my neck when storms rattled the windows had grown into a man who signed insurance forms with my name on them. The boy I once carried on my shoulders had planned to carry me down a staircase in a casket. There are wounds that don't bleed, but they drown you all the same. I sat there in the sunroom as the night air drifted through the open door. My fingers shook as I brushed away tears I didn't remember deciding to shed. I whispered into the quiet, not for anyone else, but for myself. You almost got me, Caleb. You and your perfect little architect of doom. But structures fail when the rot is on the inside. My voice cracked and a low, broken laugh escaped me. It startled me, the sound of my own amusement in a moment so absurd it felt surreal. Then the laughter dissolved into a trembling breath, and the tears came again, hot and relentless. There was grief in them, and rage, and something softer, something that tasted like relief. The silence held me. And for once, it didn't feel like punishment. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. I leaned my head back and stared at the ceiling. The chandelier above me shimmered in the dim light, as if it were made of glass tears. For a moment I imagined Martha sitting across from me in her favorite chair, knitting with her hands moving like tiny birds. Her face would soften as she looked at me and she'd say something simple, something warm, something that reminded me that love once lived here too. The memory tightened inside my throat. Losing my son felt like losing her all over again. But there is a kind of reclamation that comes from surviving. There is a dignity in refusing to go quietly into the space others have prepared for you. I had been written out of my own story, sealed away like an account to be liquidated. Tonight I wrote myself back in. Outside, the police cars drove off and the darkness returned. The last gust of wind carried away the scent of lilies, and with it the last of their plans. The house settled around me, wood groaning, pipes murmuring in the walls. But this time, the house felt like mine again. The silence was heavy. It was lonely. But it belonged to me. And after everything, that felt like victory.